Most careers don't break at the beginning. They stall after onboarding ends. The structure fades, expectations blur, and suddenly the responsibility to grow becomes personal. At the same time, work is changing faster than ever. AI is reshaping roles, hybrid teams are redefining trust, and pressure is being managed, not always well. This series isn't about motivation, and it isn't about surviving hustle culture. It's about what actually helps individuals stay effective, adaptable, and mentally ready after the first 90 days. We'll explore how people create clarity when guidance is thin, how they build skills that matter in an AI-accelerated workplace, and how they protect their energy without disengaging. Because being mission-ready isn't a personality trait, it's a way of working, one that can be designed. This is Mission Ready, thriving as an individual in the age of AI. When people don't speak up, it's often assumed they don't care. Silence gets interpreted as agreement, or apathy, or disengagement. But in many modern work environments, silence is something else entirely. It's judgment. Capable people often see issues early. They notice drift, they recognize risk, and then they pause. Not because they're checked out, but because they're calculating. They're weighing what happens if they speak up against what happens if they don't. This is especially common after clarity exists and alignment is mostly working. The signal is visible. The question isn't whether something is off, it's whether saying so is safe, timely, and worth the exposure. This episode begins there, not with fixing engagement, but with understanding why silence often reflects judgment under risk. It's cumulative. Psychological safety is often misunderstood. It's frequently described as feeling comfortable, supported, or at ease. But comfort is not what makes teams perform under uncertainty. Psychological safety is about timing. It's the ability to surface uncertainty, risk, or misalignment early, before consequences harden. This means safety does not eliminate tension. It allows tension to show up while there is still room to adjust. Performance under ambiguity requires people to notice problems before they are obvious, and to speak when outcomes are still flexible. Comfort often arrives later. Safety must exist earlier. When organizations mistake comfort for safety, they unintentionally train silence, because real risk rarely feels comfortable in the moment it matters most. Clarity is essential. People need to know what's expected, what success looks like, and where priorities sit. But clarity alone does not guarantee voice. Even when expectations are clear, people still hesitate. Not because they don't understand, but because understanding does not remove risk. In real organizations, speaking up involves exposure to judgment, exposure to consequences, exposure to being wrong in public. This is why "they knew better" is an incomplete explanation. Knowing what should happen does not automatically lead to saying something when it doesn't. Between understanding and action sit power, timing, and perceived cost. Clarity answers the question of what should happen. Psychological safety determines whether people act when they see it isn't. That gap between knowing and speaking is what this episode addresses. Before people speak up, they run a quick calculation. The first question is simple. What happens if I speak up? Will it change how I'm seen? That's reputation risk. Will it strain a relationship I rely on? That's relationship risk. Will it affect my future opportunities or stability? That's career risk. Then comes the second question. What happens if I don't? Will the risk grow quietly? Will someone else surface it later? Will I end up fixing it downstream? People compare those two costs, and when speaking up feels more expensive than staying quiet, silence becomes the rational choice. That's why policies don't automatically change behavior. Policies describe permission. Risk determines action. Accountability is often described as ownership, doing what needs to be done, delivering results, taking responsibility. But accountability does not exist without voice. When people see risk, misalignment, or failure coming and remain silent, that is not accountability. It is containment. Accountability systems collapse when safety is absent because responsibility becomes exposure. People are asked to own outcomes without being able to surface uncertainty early. In high-risk environments, hold people accountable often translates to absorb consequences quietly. This is where accountability fails. Ownership means being able to speak before outcomes harden. Silence may look compliant, but it prevents correction. And without correction, accountability becomes punishment after the fact instead of responsibility in time. Speaking up does not require full disclosure. In fact, full disclosure is often the fastest way to increase personal risk without improving outcomes. Psychological safety does not mean saying everything to everyone all at once. It means calibrated escalation, knowing what to surface, when to surface it, and to whom. Capable employees protect themselves not by staying silent, but by choosing their moments carefully. Framing matters. Surfacing risk as system impact is different from personal critique. Timing matters. Early signals carry less exposure than late objections. Audience matters. Not every concern belongs in the same room or the same forum. When escalation is calibrated, voice improves performance without overexposing the individual. This is how people stay effective and stay safe at the same time. Psychological safety doesn't improve simply because people are told to speak up. It improves when people know how to speak without increasing their personal risk. This is where practical language matters. Neutral, non-threatening framing allows concerns to surface without triggering defensiveness. One effective shift is moving from personal critique to system impact. Saying, "This approach might create downstream rework," lands differently than, "This decision is wrong." Another shift is separating observation from accusation. "I'm noticing a pattern" is not the same as, "This keeps happening because someone failed." These distinctions matter because they lower the perceived cost of speaking. When people have language that surfaces risk early without assigning blame, psychological safety becomes usable, especially under ambiguity. Hybrid and monitored work environments have changed how risk is perceived. People are more visible, but not necessarily more protected. Activity can be tracked, messages can be recorded, decisions can be revisited out of context. As visibility increases, so does the perceived cost of speaking. This is why people often speak less in monitored environments, not because they care less, but because the window for safe voice feels narrower. Timing becomes harder. Asynchronous work means concerns surface without shared context, tone, or immediate correction. A question raised late can look like resistance. A concern documented can feel permanent. Without intentional design, psychological safety degrades faster in hybrid settings, even when alignment and capability are strong. Safety here is not about removing visibility. It's about designing voice pathways that still allow early correction without unnecessary exposure. Most failures don't come out of nowhere. The risk was seen early. Patterns were noticed. Assumptions felt off. Small signals appeared. But those signals weren't spoken, or they were softened, delayed, redirected. When silence shifts risk downstream, problems grow quietly. By the time escalation happens, options are fewer, costs are higher, and correction feels abrupt. This is why late escalation often feels sudden to leadership, even though it wasn't sudden at all. For the people closest to the work, the risk has been present for some time. Carrying unspoken concerns is exhausting. Over time, that exhaustion turns into burnout, not from workload alone, but from repeated restraint. This is the hidden cost of delayed voice, not just failure, but fatigue. Psychological safety is often discussed as a cultural value, something teams are encouraged to prioritize if time allows. In reality, psychological safety functions as infrastructure. When it's missing, performance systems fail even when talent is strong and expectations are clear. Without safety, risk surfaces late. Rework accumulates quietly. Decisions slow as people wait for certainty that never arrives. Safety does not protect comfort, it protects quality. It allows uncertainty to surface while outcomes are still flexible. This is not a personality issue, it is a leadership design issue. When systems do not protect early voice, they absorb cost later, in time, in money, and in people. Psychological safety does not emerge because people are asked to be open. It emerges because systems make early voice survivable. This is why safety must be designed, not requested. People pay far less attention to what leaders say than to what happens when someone actually speaks up. Reactions matter more than statements. A pause, a dismissal, a visible consequence. These moments quietly teach the organization whether voice is welcome or risky. Leaders rarely intend to train silence, but they often do, through inconsistent reactions, rushed decisions, or post hoc consequences that punish early signal. Safety is reinforced or undermined in small moments, not policy announcements. When systems reward early correction, voice increases naturally. When systems absorb cost later, silence becomes rational. Designing safety means aligning consequences with timing, so speaking early carries less risk than waiting. Throughout this episode, we've looked at silence, hesitation, and delayed escalation. The core shift is simple. Psychological safety determines whether signal is used. Signal can be clear, risk can be visible, alignment can exist, and still, nothing happens. Not because people don't care, not because they don't understand, but because acting on signal carries cost. Silence is not random. It is predictable in systems that punish early voice or absorb correction late. This is why fixing people doesn't fix execution. Coaching courage doesn't change timing. Culture statements don't override consequences. Psychological safety is the missing execution layer, the condition that determines whether insight becomes action while outcomes are still flexible. When safety is designed, signal moves early. When it isn't, silence does exactly what the system teaches it to do. Burnout rarely arrives all at once. It builds quietly, through unspoken concerns, deferred risks, and repeated restraint. When people see problems early but don't surface them, energy drains over time. Work continues, output holds, but the cost accumulates internally. This is why burnout often appears without warning. The warning signs were there, they just weren't voiced. In the next episode, we'll reframe burnout not as a failure of resilience, motivation, or boundaries, but as the predictable outcome of systems that require silence to function. Episode 6 focuses on what happens when sustained silence finally shows up as fatigue.